All right, we are live. I'm going to wait until we get some folks on here. Hopefully people drop in, taste some wine with us. Oops. Oh, we've got Diane. Hi, Diane. Hi, Sarah. All right, I'm going to wait for those of you that already joined us. I'm going to wait a few minutes here, and we're going to get some other traffic going. But before we do that, and then I'm going to bring on Jason, Hilary. But before we do that, I've got a couple little things I want to announce and point out, and I'll talk about this at the end of tonight's thing too. Hey, Mark, how's it going? This week starts our big semi-annual wine sale at our Wausau location. Hi, Barb. And starts on Wednesday. So the big sale is, many of you, most of you probably are familiar with the deal, is you buy 3 bottles, you get 3 free. Minimum purchase is 3, you get 3 wines free. Obviously, they're select bottles. But after that, it's buy one, get one. So you get opportunity to stock up for summer. The wine sale starts this Wednesday from 2 o'clock to 7 o'clock is for our Kicker Club wine member club only. So just if you're a Kicker Club member, come in on Wednesday, start buying wine. On Thursday, all day long is for our general wine club members. So if you're a member of the wine club at either location, either our Weston location or our Wausau location, you can come in, you can buy 3, get 3, and then buy one, get one. And then starting on Friday and Saturday, it's open up to everybody. So tell your friends, tell your family. It's at the Wausau Vino location, only at the Wausau Vino location. And we're going to have another register set up that's going to be cash and check only, so that if you come in and you've got cash and check, you can sort of expedite the purchase, and it's going to sort of facilitate in what we'd like to see is some responsible social distancing. We'd like you to wear a mask if you come in. We're going to be hanging out. We're all going to have face masks on so we can talk wine. We may or may not be pouring wine to taste. Probably not, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And if it gets super crazy hectic, we may limit who can come in and maybe start a little queue waiting line type thing. Hey, Nick, how's it going? We are then looking to the future. At the end of tonight's little broadcast, we're going to talk about some other cool events that we have coming up. So if you're interested in some food pairing type event, we've got an announcement for you later on. With all that being said, and we'll go over the wine sale stuff again. And we've got Nick is on, and Nick is from out of the area, but he picked up the wine somewhere else, which is fabulous. That's great. Of course, we'd love for you to support us, but since you're 3 hours away, we know that you got to buy your wine somewhere. So, and it's great that they have Tilth down there, because as we get Jason, Hilary on here and we start talking about the size of their production, the fact that they're in Wisconsin is bizarro world to begin with, but it's fabulous. And when they come on, I'm going to introduce them, and they know the story about how we met, obviously, but I'm going to talk about that for everybody else that's joined on. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Jason, Hilary on here. They're going to be jumping on so that they can share their story. Hey, Jason. Hey, Hilary. How are you guys doing?
How's it going? Good. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So Jason, Hilary, they run, I guess, operate as a parent company as the Driscoll Wine Company, correct?
Yep.
And underneath Driscoll, you do 2 labels. You do your Tilth labels, which are these super cool labels. Everybody's got them, so why I'm showing them, I don't know, but super cool labels. But then you also do Hebrew wines, and that's pretty much just Pinot Noir.
It's just Pinot Noir, and now we do a little Syrah, a barrel of Syrah under that label. But yeah, those are kind of our top 1 to 3 barrels per vineyard.
Okay. All right. So for everybody out there, we met, Lorene and I, and Lorene's not joining us on camera tonight. She's sitting in the background. She's waving at me, at everybody else, but she's actually on, and she's going to be answering questions, typing in responses and things like that. But we met Jason and Hilary at Kohler Food and Wine now 2.5 years ago, I think it was. Not this past October, but the October before.
Yep.
And for those of you that don't know what Kohler Food and Wine is, it's this huge, as the name suggests, food and wine event where they bring in a bunch of winemakers and winery principals, and they pour just a ton of wines, and they've got seminars and different things that you can sit in and learn about the wines and ask questions and do really sort of focused tastings. Well, we met them at one of the tables, and they're pouring their wines. And as soon as we tasted through them, immediately I was like, you know what? These are great wines. We chat a little bit. We needed to bring them into the shop. And so, I think the next week we made our first order from the distributor with the wines. And ever since then, saw you guys last year, and still love the wine, love the uniqueness, the character. And I think this is going to be, for anybody on here that's not tasted your wines, I think this is going to be an eye-opener to what really sort of boutique-y stuff, especially your Zins that are not just weird over-extracted fruit bombs. I mean, they've got great character. But without further ado, why don't you tell us about you guys a little bit and your story into the wine world?
Sure. We kind of fell into the wine world. We graduated from college in 2009 when the economy wasn't the best. I actually studied politics, which is super irrelevant to what I do now. But Hilary luckily stayed married. We got married like the year after college, and I had to get a job right away. So I got a job selling Campbell's soup in Los Angeles. And I had a big minivan, and it said good on the license plate, and super sexy job. But
Did it have the big Campbell's soup can on the side of it too, or no?
I did not, but I had a big Campbell's soup can in our apartment.
Two of them filled with supplies for stocking stores.
Yep.
Excellent.
But it was a job, and I found quick that I was not a good salesperson, and I wanted to work with my hands. I always wanted to work with my hands. I just had to figure out how I was going to do that, and my intention was to be a chef. Hilary was working at a gym, opening a gym at like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. We were both just tired, so I got a call from a buddy up in Washington saying, "Hey, man, you're 22 years old. Like, live a little. Come up here and work at this winery." So Hilary, not even reluctantly, Hilary was just like, "Let's do it." So we dropped everything, moved up to Washington, super crazy for 6 months. I worked in a kitchen at night and worked at Elsom Cellars in Woodinville during the day, basically just shoveling tanks and cleaning bins. And I was like their janitor. And I learned so much, but I really wanted to be a chef still. And my experience in the kitchen in Seattle was just like unbelievable. I just got to see so many awesome fresh ingredients and large volume discrepancy. Oh, sorry. I don't know if they can hear me. I'm sorry.
Should Jason just move closer?
Can you hear me?
I think I talk really loud, and so yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to work out. I think if you talk loud and you sit a little closer, hopefully it'll work out.
I'm going to talk as loud as possible. But yeah, I ended up going to culinary school in Napa Valley, and I was exposed to so many different wines and wineries around here that I kind of just naturally fell into the cellar right after culinary school. No intentions of starting a business, no business model. I just wanted to kind of follow my passion, work in the cellar, have a job that paid me. And then a couple of years into the cellar, to kind of make the story short, Hilary and I were working so many hours raising kids and me in the cellar that we just said, hey, let's try this for ourselves. And we did on the side, and it kind of slowly grew into something. And now we get to go to Wisconsin and visit you guys.
Sweet. And now I bet you're sort of like, you look back and you think, man, we should have stayed doing what we were doing because we work a lot less then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
No, but it's a blast. We feel super lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. So where are you guys located?
We are based in So we make our wines in Oakville at Gamble Family Vineyards. We lease space there. And then we live in St. Helena, right in the heart of Napa Valley.
Right in the heart of Napa. Fabulous. All right. So let's, so I know that we have a Wisconsin audience. So I already know that they're probably like 3/4 of the way through most of these bottles. And so we're joining them when they've already been drinking, which is fabulous. But let's go on. Let's introduce the first wine here. And they've got the wines and they've got the tech sheets, as we've already talked about. So let's talk about the 2017 Napa Valley Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, so this comes from a 1-acre site in St. Helena off the Silverado Trail. I approached this guy, Bill Burkett, to see if I could. I had no idea how much his fruit was. It was kind of an unkept vineyard of Sauvignon Blanc and what we thought was Semillon. And he said in exchange for his fruit, I could farm the vineyard. So I don't have to pay for fruit. I just have to farm it, which I thought was an easy thing. It's not. And but it was a huge learning experience, and I've just fallen in love with this vineyard. About 25% of the vineyard actually is Muscat of Alexandria, and the balance is Sauvignon Blanc. And debating on, we press it all together, we age it together. But yeah, we'll pick middle of the night, press it right to barrels. So we ferment in oak, our Sauvignon Blanc, and we ferment on the lees. And stir once a month just to give it a little more texture, because I'm not a fan of sort of super lean, grassy Sauvignon Blancs. I wanted to make something a little more, something with a little more mouthfeel.
So you said what percentage is Muscat?
So in the vineyard, it's 25% Muscat.
25.
Yeah, I see the text sheet. It says 5%.
I assume that's the wine.
Yes.
Yes.
Versus what? Yeah. So Lorene's chatting to me. So in the vineyard, it's 25% of Muscat and 75% Sauvignon Blanc. But when you make the wine, you just blend about 5% or a small percentage of Muscat into it.
We'll co-ferment that.
You do co-ferment it. Okay. So just for clarification for the folks that are listening, Muscat of Alexandria is the most, I guess, the most well-known, the most widely planted of the Muscat varieties. There are, I don't know, a couple hundred different like Muscat varieties or clones or whatever you want to call them. There's a lot of them. But Muscat of Alexandria, I believe, is the most popular. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's super aromatic.
And it is also the one that if somebody's drinking a sweet Moscato, it's likely Muscat of Alexandria, correct?
Yeah. So it's like a pasito way. They'll air dry the grapes in Italy, and they'll let them kind of dry out for maybe up to a week, maybe longer, and then they'll press them to sort of concentrate the flavors and the sugars.
Yeah. So so it's the same grape that makes those sweet Moscatos. So that's a really interesting thing. And then, like Jason said, they co-ferment it. So that means they pick it all and they throw it in the same barrels and they let it ferment together, which you don't see a lot of. It's sort of the old mentality, and I think we've talked on one of the other broadcasts, the old mentality of a field blend, like an Italian field blend, where they used to just harvest entire vineyards because they didn't care what was in them. They just wanted the end product. So they'd grab all the grapes, they'd let them ferment together, and you got what you got, more or less, sort of in the old traditional way of making field blends.
Yes, it's kind of a cool expression of the site.
Yeah. And then I think the whole oak thing is really interesting for a Sauvignon Blanc because, as you suggested, that's not overly typical. And then, as we've also talked about on one of the broadcasts, they age it on the lees, and the lees are the dead yeast cells. And so by stirring it like that, it gives it that textural characteristic, that mouthfeel. So contrary to, I think we tasted a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand in one of our past Facebook tastings, and it's a completely 180-degree different representation of the same variety.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's everybody smelling and tasting this? Chime in here. Tell us what you're smelling, tasting.
This is one of my favorite sites because it's right around the corner from our home. And so we can take our children, we can go and harvest with Jason. We make cocoa early in the morning.
They come to the pick. It's awesome.
it's one that we can really be involved in for the kids to see what we're doing, which is really exciting.
That floral characteristic from the Muscat is really present on the nose. Super floral. And then in the mouth, it's melon and lush. And in as much as you might not like that racy acidity, there's a good backbone in here. It's still mouth-watering. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we picked this, the Muscat's at around 20 bricks, and the Sauvignon Blanc is around 22. So it kind of, the Muscat has a lot of acid in it when we pick it, but it's still, because it naturally has kind of volume as a grape. It lends itself to kind of more, pears and hibiscus. That's a good tasting note.
Yeah.
Elaine.
Yeah.
I'm
So
putting
many times people ask us, they'll like read a tasting note and they're like, well, how do they get this? And I say, I'll tell you how they get this, because we've been when like winemakers are like, hey, we got to write some tasting notes, come taste with us. And you just stand around a room and you taste and you throw out things that you're smelling like, hey, that's a good one. Yeah. So Elaine, don't be surprised if pears and hibiscus shows up on a tasting note in the future.
Yeah.
So
definitely. I'm actually going to snap a screenshot of that.
I'll put that up there. Go ahead.
We got Cantaloupe, gooseberry, acacia. Oh, it's in our room.
Yeah, so Nick is getting cantaloupe, gooseberry, acacia, yeah. So,
super aromatic site. I'm excited with how this is tasting. You feel pressured to release wines like the current release is, a lot of people are releasing their 2019s, things like that. But you kind of taste these vintages a couple of years back, and they come around, and it's fun to drink them.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about, I know that the tasting note says that it is, aged in neutral oak and fermented neutral oak, all that. When I think about historically kind of Sauvignon Blanc aged in oak, my brain goes back to, was it Robert Mondavi did Fumé Blanc and labeled it Fumé Blanc because it was sort of Sauvignon Blanc in oak. What do you see as the benefit to putting your Sauvignon Blanc into oak like that?
I think texture. It goes back to the being able to harvest early, having that acid, but balancing it with texture. You have a greater ratio of lees to juice with 225 liter barrels than you would in a big tank. So it gives you some room to play if you want to stir. Even if you don't stir, the lees, the autolysis is going to occur over time, and it's going to break down and potentially offer a little more creaminess to the wine that otherwise would just be a bunch of acid. Which I don't want to. I actually like those wines. It's just for our style. We wanted a little more texture without going like overtly new oak. So I think having neutral oak gives you a container to ferment in that keeps the lees to juice ratio up.
Very cool.
When I was training there, a guy I drink a producer named Didier Dagenau at Sancerre. He makes a Sauvignon Blanc, and my former boss David DeSanti was a big fan of his, and he had me kind of read all about this one producer. This is before I ever made Sauvignon Blanc alone. And this guy fermented in these kind of cigar barrels, long oak barrels. And I just figured it was normal. And then after I started doing it and researching more, I realized not a lot of people are, I think it's more traditional to ferment in stainless steel and do that.
Right. All right. Very, very cool. I like this wine a lot. I think Barb mentioned that it's very food friendly because it doesn't have that super racy acidity. It's not super grapefruit and grassy. And so it might lend itself to dishes that got or have less acid, some creamy dishes, just really nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. great deck wine as far as I'm concerned.
Port founder.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the Pinot Noir. But before we do that, I want to, and I asked you earlier, but I want to point out to everybody, all of our guests, that your total production. So you make the 2 labels. Your total production of Tilth label. Well, for example, the Sauvignon Blanc. How much of the Sauvignon Blanc do you make?
That's like a few hundred cases. That's 150 to 200 cases. And then now our current, like in 2019, we'll be at like 500 cases because we added a vineyard in Oakville that was I really liked it, Gamble Vineyard. But up until this year, yeah, about 200 cases.
So minuscule, yeah. So minuscule.
That's right.
And the total production of your Tilth wines. What's your total case production?
Our total case production now is 3,000 cases of our Tilth.
And how much of the Hebrew?
We're at 600 cases.
Yeah, yeah. So for everybody that's viewing tonight, we can get some of the Hebrew wines, and it's great Pinot Noir. And everybody that's on here knows how much I love Pinot Noir. It's great Pinot. Not that the Tilth isn't, but your Hebrew vineyard designate stuff is fabulous. But to be able to see this small of a production of a winery, of a winemaker, and with Jason Hilary's product, to see this stuff in Wisconsin is a complete fluke. It is unheard of because, as I mentioned these guys earlier when we were chatting, Wisconsin is not the wine mecca. Okay, so you don't expect to see a winery that makes a few hundred cases or a couple hundred cases or 150 cases of a wine. You don't see that. You expect to see that wine in Wisconsin. So we're really thrilled that it can be here. It's the exact kind of wine that we want to carry in our shop and present to our customers. So I think that's awesome. At any rate, let's go ahead and move on to the Pinot. Why don't you go ahead and talk us through the Pinot?
Okay, so a majority of this Pinot Noir comes from a vineyard called Tina Marie Vineyard, and it's right off Green Valley Road. It's in Grayton, a small town, kind of right near Sebastopol. But I got an opportunity to get this fruit. I was kind of hounding. When we started, I would knock on doors. I'd leave notes on porches. It's hard to get into vineyards, especially good vineyards, especially in the Russian River too. And I just happened to call somebody at the right time, and they lost a vineyard. They lost a winery that was buying their fruit, and it was a few months before harvest. So I kind of jumped on the opportunity to work with this guy named Ron Black. And it's right in the heart of the Russian River. It's got gold-rich soil. I was super excited. So this is 2017, right before we harvested, right before the fires, actually. There was a heat wave. It was like a 115-degree day. And the sugars went from like 18 bricks to like 23 bricks, like that. So just from the heavy amount of heat. So we called the pick. It was a rush of a harvest to get it off the vine and organize the logistics of picking the fruit, having it hauled, getting the tanks ready. So it was kind of an exhilarating experience, but the wine I think turned out really well. Processed it right to a bunch of open top tanks and bins. And we don't add any commercial yeasts to our fermentation. So we kind of just let the ferment ride, and whatever's happening in the winery, kind of whoever's yeast is strongest, I guess, will ferment our wines. But yeah, super light touch to this wine. And
I think we have the 2018, I think, is what the one.
2018, I'm sorry.
We do too.
Oh, we do too.
Okay.
Yeah, I was totally just telling a story. Oh my God. Oh, cool. Awesome. Yeah, 2018 was like I had everything dialed in. I knew the site. It was planned. I was organized, unlike every other harvest before that. I was really excited about 2018 because we didn't have any fires, we didn't have any heat, but yeah, 70% of this wine is whole cluster. So we'll get the fruit and we'll sort through the clusters and we'll dump them straight in the bin without taking the berries off, the grapes off the stems. And that's a separate fermentation, and the balance will destem and ferment with just the fruit. So that kind of offers a little more density. But yeah, sorry, I had the wrong vintage.
No, that's right. That's right. As my wife was just shouting from the stairwell, thank God for wives, because Hilary had to,
I just let it go with the story too because
She
it's
was
a great
pinching my leg, and I was like, "What?"
yeah, that's all right.
Still fun.
That's right. So, what is the on the text sheet? It says 90% Tina Marie, and then the $10 Riddle Vineyards.
10% Riddle Vineyard is Riddle is another single vineyard. Most of that goes to Ibu, and then I peeled off some barrels from there to blend it. I thought it had a little more texture, a little more richness, because this alone, it was very lean, kind of. I thought it was a very beautiful wine on its own, to be honest. But we did a single vineyard, Tina Marie vineyard, for Ibu. So we combined our two single vineyards for the Russian River, and we made a kind of Russian River blend. But beautiful site in Sebastopol, and actually Occidental, right near a vineyard called Silver Eagle, which is another unbelievable Pinot Noir vineyard over there. But yeah, super low yielding vines. We're very lucky to be in all of our Pinot Noir vineyards, to be honest. I don't know how we got lucky, but it's how we got this lucky. It's pretty cool.
The two vineyards that are compiled in this one, we do have the single vineyards of Ibu. If anyone was at Kohler last year, that's what we were pouring in the, what's the biggest, the one
the toilet one?
Yeah, the toilet one.
They have it's the Kohler museum with the toilets on the wall.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. So what's everybody tasting, smelling in this? Chime in here. Tell us what you're thinking. Lorene's getting a lot of mushroom and cola.
Like mushroom soaked in cola.
Mushroom soaked in cola, she says.
That's a good thing.
I like that note. To me, that's
using that one too.
Earth and stem.
Mm-hmm.
So I get a little bit of and maybe and you can tell me if this comes from the whole cluster. Just a hint of not only like that mushroom, forest floor, dirty nose, but a hint of like a vegetal herbal characteristic. It's not like green pepper, but it's got a green sort of undertone to it. Is that from the whole cluster with a little bit of stem in there?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So yes, that's from the stems. So to avoid that becoming offensive, we'll press early with our whole cluster fermentations. We won't let them finish the primary fermentation on the stems. We'll finish that in barrel because we want just enough of the earthiness, but we don't want it to be offensive. And if it is, be honest, let me know. But yeah, I'll just go cry in the corner.
So I assume that just like with tannin, that as a wine ferments and the alcohol increases, that alcohol can withdraw more of those harsher characteristics from the stems.
Yes.
So that's why you don't let the alcohol get so high before you press it, and then you finish it. The fermentation finishes outside of or just with the juice only, no stems.
Absolutely. So fermenting on stems is risky because you're introducing a lot of different things to the fermentation. And when you let the fermentation happen, say in a T-bin, which doesn't have temperature control, these fermentations get really hot, and you introduce heat with also alcohol, you get a lot of extraction. So you can get a lot of kind of green, harsh characteristics, especially later on when there's a heavier presence of alcohol. So we want to avoid that.
Right.
I always think it has a slight medicinal note to it, which I'm actually attracted to. That's something that I like, but I always can kind of smell it. And
brown sugar sausage and walnuts.
That's fun.
Right, our tasting notes.
I like it.
Mushroom and cola. These are good for me to hear this.
Yeah. The ocean.
It's salty. That's cool.
So she says walnuts. What I get is that it's not the nut. To me, it's more the husk.
Mm. That's interesting. I almost wonder if that's a product of the oak aging too.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
what-
Or like, if you ever get almonds, like when I was a kid, and we always tell people, obviously smells and tastes and aromas can take you places that are not just in the glass. They're your past. They're when you were a kid. And when I was a kid, every Christmas, my parents got the big, like basket of nuts of all like the filberts and the walnuts and the almonds. And you use the old metal nutcracker and you'd crack them.
Heck yeah.
So that is like, that walnut to me is like the husk of the walnuts or the husk of the almonds, almost that you almost smell like the dusty characteristic of it on your palate. So
Mark wants to know how the name Tilth came to be.
That,
Right.
So it means cultivated soil. It was honestly the first term I learned when I worked for I call it DeSanti University. I worked for a guy named David DeSanti and his wife, Catherine DeSanti. And I was their assistant winemaker. I was more like an apprentice. And I would just follow them around everywhere, all the vineyards. And they consult a few different brands. So they were all over Northern California. And the first thing he taught me was when you get out of a truck at a vineyard, first thing you should look at or notice is the dirt underneath your feet. So the soil health and what type of dirt is it? And that's the first thing that you notice when you walk a vineyard. It could be good, it could be bad. And I kind of stuck with that word in the back of my head while I was, cellar work, no real intention of starting a brand. And then Hill and I were talking about starting this. We said, hey, why don't we call it Tilth? It's one syllable. It means something that means something a lot to us. So,
Well, and especially with the background of cooking that Jason has, and you're taking these great ingredients. I mean, being in winemaking, starting with the soil and then the fruit that grows in it, and then you're creating something beautiful out of it. I think it has a lot more meaning too.
And way down, so when we teach our wine tasting classes, we talk about tasting at the bottom of the glass, top of the glass, and all around the opening of the glass. And way down low in the glass, I get that. That's where I get the dirt. That's where I get that soil. Where I get that earthy. And then up high is where I get that cola, that bright cherry cola kind of.
Oops.
Whoops.
Sorry, we have an 8-year-old walking around here.
the background over here is like, hey, come on over.
So do you let the kids? Have you already started introducing them to like the swirl and the smell portion of wine tasting?
Oh
Yep.
Yep. Absolutely.
They know Tilth. They know.
I mean, if they're picking grapes, they might as well be smelling them and tasting them, and
they gotta taste the product.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's great. That's a fabulous wine.
Thank you.
Any other input on the wine? Let's see.
We got people who got Robitussin, which is the medicinal.
Yeah. I know it's like for me, you say Robitussin, and I think like codeine almost.
Codeine is a drug. It's not really an aroma.
I'm aware.
I just want to point that out that it's a narcotic. So Lorene frequently talks about how when she like drinks wine and stuff and she gets a high alcohol characteristic and she's like, oh, I just love that. I always joke that she's like a huffer from way back. So that's all right. It's just sort of a little inside joke. But if you get codeine, that's fine. It helps with the aches and pains of working in the vineyard, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's good.
And now I'm being chastised by our manager.
It cured my cough.
You guys have met Sarah. Sarah's a manager at one of our shops. She was at Kohler last year with us.
Oh yeah.
Thanks for the backup, Sarah.
All right. So let's go ahead and if anybody has any more questions, feel free to chime in. But let's go ahead and talk about the Zin.
So the Zin, this is kind of our baby. It was my first shot at not this particular vintage, but just this project was my first shot at getting into this business, was making fruit from really any site that I thought was interesting. And I just kind of stumbled upon a site called Devil's Kitchen. This is 2015. We're drinking the 16 today, but, oh no, 2014 was our first vintage. And I was working for Dave DeSanti, like I said before, and this is just a really cool head train site up on Mount Canupti. And I had no idea what the fruit was, but I asked to buy the 4 tons of fruit that one little vineyard produced. And the guy was like, "All right, well, yeah, that's cool. Like, it's Zinfandel." And that's kind of how we got into Zin. Just I saw the site, saw the soil, saw the vines. It was super cool site, super cool story, and kind of fell into making that. Once we got to 2016, I had bugged so many different growers to sell me fruit that I thought was interesting. I drove my truck like all throughout Northern California and met people either on Twitter or Facebook, or just like looked up wines I liked and figured out where they were from. And that's kind of how we developed all these vineyards, or found all these vineyards. But this particular wine is 75% of it is Zin. The balance is kind of, it's like a little introduction to the Wild West. It's got Valdegui, it's got Petit Syrah, it's got Syrah. There's a little bit of whole cluster in it. The Zinfandels from Contra Costa County and from Lodi. Contra Costa is just a unbelievable region to farm Zinfandel. It's all like beach sand, like it's called Delhi sand. It's white sand. And the vines are all, 85 to 100-year-old vines. So much history at these sites.
So are those, so with that sandy soil, are they still on original rootstock, or have they been planted over?
No, those are on original rootstock.
So they're on vinifera rootstock.
It's unbelievable. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, because sand and phylloxera, phylloxera has a tough time penetrating sand.
Yep.
Yeah, so it was just it's a great, there's power lines and like bombed out buildings all around this area where this vineyard is for Del Parva. And then you find these just gorgeous, beautiful vines amongst that were preserved. But yeah, the way we make Zin is how we make our Pinot. It's just open top fermentation. It's not a closed top tank, so we try to blow off all the ethanol. Native yeasts, very light touch, 2 punch downs a day. Sometimes we'll just do pump overs for a day. Pump over is just taking the juice from the bottom and kind of lightly spraying the cap. But just minimal effort to complete the fermentation in a healthy way, so it doesn't get funky and stinky. But just want to make sort of an acid-driven version of a Zinfandel, kind of a refreshing Zin.
And where does the majority of that acid come from? Is it the Zin, or is some of the blend that you're getting that acid, or harvesting a little less ripe? What's doing the acid?
So we're calling our picks at 23 bricks and it'll come in at like 25, and then which is lower for Zin, but it still yields, a riper, like a 14.5 to 15% alcohol Zin. But with the Valdegui, for instance, I picked it, didn't even look really at the numbers. I probably should have, to be honest, but it just tasted really fresh. And it ended up being, very low bricks, very high acid on its own, which I loved on its own, actually. That's what we bottled it. We did a single vineyard Valdegui from Frediani Vineyard in Calistoga. But I thought it blended pretty well into our Zin, along with the Syrah that we had, which had stems. So that kind of offered some spice. And it's just fun kind of in the cellar playing around and blending.
So let's, just because I don't think we've talked about it on any of the prior tastings, let's talk a little bit about bricks, because you've mentioned it many times. And I just want to make sure that everybody here understands bricks and what it means in sort of the wine harvest. So like a real brief thing on bricks and harvesting and all that.
Yeah. So when you're growing any type of fruit, as the season goes on, you accumulate sugar, and we use something called a hydrometer in the vineyard, and then in the winery we call it a DMA. It's a little more accurate, but a hydrometer which measures sugar using bricks as the unit. So the hydrometer is 1 to 30, 1 being very, very like no sugar, and then 30 being like max, but very high sugar. But then you do a conversion. So you'll take say 20 bricks and you multiply that times 0.57 and you get your potential alcohol once it's all fermented. So we'll go and we do focus on bricks and we focus on pH. We measure pH, the acid in a grape too, to help guide our picking decision. But another important thing is being in the vineyard and actually tasting the grapes. So it could be, 20, you think it's right because the number says it's 23 bricks, but then you taste it and it tastes super green. So, and that means the seed hasn't developed. So you let it hang a little longer and kind of ripen a little longer. You got to pay attention to weather. It's going to be cooler. Can we afford to let it hang, or is there rain coming? It's an important decision. A pick is a very important decision.
Absolutely.
You're spending a lot of money on that fruit.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the best part is figuring out when you're going to pick. And then the logistics come after that. And that's a fun deal.
Yeah. So the dummy version of bricks, he said, hydrometer, we always call it a brixometer because basically you squeeze a grape into this thing, you look at it and you say, yep, it's this amount of bricks. And, the greater the bricks at harvest means the more sugar means the higher potential alcohol. And so Zin coming off of, the vineyards, I'm guessing they're probably normally harvesting Zin at 27 to 28, 29 bricks.
Yeah.
And that's giving you a Zins, those high extracted Zins, they're hitting 15, 5, 16% alcohol. This one, I think, if I can read the label in the light here, is like 14.8 or something, 14.8 plus or minus 1%. And then with the blends of the other stuff, you're getting that acidity. One of the things we've had, like a universal discussion in all of our tastings, is blends. And when you see like yours, you've got 2% Petite Syrah on this. When you're talking about like a 1% or a 2% of another variety put into this wine, is there really an impact in that small percentage?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. On a day-to-day basis, probably not. But when you're at a table and you have a bunch of different samples, and you're it's also figuring out, what am I going to do with this barrel? What am I going to do with that? Does it go well? It's very mental. So it's not all based on science and numbers. It could be that day I just felt, man, this Petite Syrah, we got it from Oakville. Oh, this improved the blend so much. It really lifted it, gave it like nice dark color, gave it a little more structure, because Petite Syrah can have a lot of structure, a lot of tannin, especially from this particular site. But maybe my buddy or my wife or my son, my 8-year-old son, I probably shouldn't use him as an example, but they would never taste the difference, But for me in that moment, 2% made a difference. And we continue to blend like that. If we have a lot that's like 3 barrels of something and it's a really good lot, it can lift the blend. But that's more in my head. It's subjective to anybody else's opinion. It's very subjective.
Well, and that's the way you have to blend. I mean, you're the winemaker, so you got to blend very subjectively to what adds. And that's why I always say about those weird blends is the only way you're going to know if it makes a difference is if Jason would have bottled this exact same wine without that 2%, and then you would have tasted them side by side. That's the only way you're going to know. But absolutely, Petite Syrah adds that inky, dark, heavy mouthfeel. Most certainly. I think it makes a big difference. But that's because I've sat at a blending table and tasted, every individual component and then started putting them together and see what it changes down the road. And that's obviously how you guys blend.
And I mean, take a look at Syrah. You look at Syrah, and a lot of people co-ferment with Viognier, and they'll use 1 to 3% of Viognier, and it makes a very large difference when you co-ferment with Viognier and Syrah. I mean, that's an example of blending something at a very low percentage that has a very strong influence. So yeah, that's something to say for it. Maybe I'm trying to convince myself, but.
And of course, that classic blend or that classic co-ferment and blend with Syrah and Viognier, which is obviously a white grape, is really about aromatics and about color. I mean, so those two elements have been historically done in Northern Rhone. But yeah, it's fabulous. And the other thing that we've noticed a lot over the 16 and a half years we've been in business is we're starting to see more and more blends that are Zin-based blends. And this is, of course, varietally labeled because it's got 75%. But that concept of Zin becoming something more than just that standalone California signature grape, Zins are now becoming what, you look at Cab and Merlot and so many of the other classical grapes that are put into blends. Zin is becoming that in California. I mean, the most famous, and I'll just throw the name out, but when we look at Prisoner and the Prisoner copycats, so many of them are now Zin-based blends. This is, in my opinion, much better than that because of the characteristic of it and the depth of it. But that's becoming a sort of an industry movement, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, California, there's thousands and thousands of acres of Zin planted and old vine Zin that you can find some real gems out there. And Zin is an amazing variety. And it's not maybe the most popular grape in the world, but it's delicious. And if you can make it better by adding Mourvedre, Carignan, Syrah, why not? It's better for the customer. It's better for us. It's more fun for us. But yeah, I love Zin-based blends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Question about temperature.
Yeah. So Lisa, I was going to put it on here, but it'd probably take up the whole screen. Lisa asks about temperature of wine service. I'll throw it up here. We'll see how.
Oh, I'm the wrong person to ask. I drink wine when it's in my hand. I actually like let's see, take fridge 20 minutes before consuming and put reds in the fridge 20 minutes before. I like my wines a little colder, to be completely honest. I know technically you're supposed to drink red wine at 60 degrees, and white wines at 50-ish, plus or minus. But I like both. I like wines a little more restrained. To me, when they get warm, you can taste the alcohol a little more, taste the ethanol. Some people would disagree with me because you definitely can taste the imperfections of a wine as it gets warmer. So maybe that's just me trying to sell you. Taste my wine very cold. But
so the way that we always teach it is a range of about 20 degrees, from 45 degrees to 65 degrees. At 45 degrees, you're drinking your sparkling, your Pinot Grigios, your really light white wines. Then in about 5-degree increments, from 45 to 65, you go from sparkling wine and light-bodied whites to medium and heavy-bodied whites at about 50 to 55 degrees. Then your light-bodied reds like Pinot Noir at about 55 degrees to 60 degrees. Your medium-bodied and heavy-bodied reds from 60 to 65 degrees. Never room temperature at 70 degrees, and that red wine should always be cool to the touch because they should be warm, or they should be cooler than 98.7. The 20-minute rule, I actually agree with. You pull wines out, like white wines out, 20 to 30 minutes before you're going to serve them out of a fridge, and you put reds for about 20 to 30 minutes. That gets them to that temperature. And you're right. Actually, I think it's Robert Parker. I think it was Robert Parker claimed to always taste every wine, whites, reds, everything, at room temperature because flaws will stand out when the wine is warmer. If it's out of balance, it's going to be exaggerated when the wine is warm. And acid will stand out when a wine is served too cold, and alcohol will stand out when wine is served too warm. From everything that I've known and read and heard.
Oh, absolutely.
But as Lorene has pointed out, you drink the wines the way you enjoy them. So if you like them cold, drink them cold. If you like them warm, drink them warm. And the good thing about serving them too cold is they will always warm up. If you serve them too warm, it's really difficult to cool them off. So,
Yep.
Especially with when you want a glass of wine, you typically want it right then.
right.
You don't want to wait to chill
Tilly
it.
wants her glass right now.
Yeah. Patience is a difficult thing to exercise when you're in the mood for a glass. And Nick says, keep them cool. All right. Any other input or questions? Lorene, got anything?
I do a little beat.
A little what?
Beat.
Okay, so Lorene says on the Zin, she gets a little feet, like a dirty feet,
But not like.
but not in a bad way.
Like that animal.
So we use any and all terminology, whether it's like, not in the Zin, but whether it's dirty feet or poopy or, cat pee for Sauvignon Blanc. It doesn't matter what you smell. Shout it out.
Whatever.
What?
Bile.
Bile. Yeah, for Chardonnay, I get bile in Chardonnay sometimes, and that's never pleasant, but it's descriptive.
Putting dirty feet on my tasting note though next year.
Dirty. You want to sell wine, you put dirty feet on the tasting note. And,
No.
yeah.
We'll do it. To be honest, we foot stomp our grapes, so that probably comes from that.
There you go. So I smell Hilary's feet. It's codeine soaked feet.
Codeine soaked feet.
Yeah.
That's why my mouth is numb.
Yeah. So I think that anytime somebody talks about like that feet or whatever, I think that's that sort of dirty, earthy, rusticy animal that adds. Yeah, like meat. Like I think Elaine or somebody mentioned, or maybe it was Diane mentioned sausage. That characteristic, when it comes to a wine, that's character, right?
Yeah, that's what we're going for. It's not like a wine that you can predict every single year. It's going to be consistent factory made, which there's a huge market for those wines. Our wines are inconsistent. They're vintage to vintage. We have different blends every year. I have fun. I kind of get distracted a lot with the different cool projects, I feel like, and it ends up going into a blend. I think the meatiness, to be honest, and a little bit of funk is probably coming from the Syrah, which is pretty common. But the Syrah we had in the foothills was 100% whole cluster kind of experiment. That was, to be honest, really good on its own, and that definitely made its way into this blend. So, yeah, you can attribute the meatiness probably to Syrah. Maybe even a little bit of the Petite Syrah.
Yeah. So you guys contract all your fruit. You don't own any vineyards?
Not yet. It is, we lease blocks, and one day. It's kind of nice. We pick where we want to pick from, and we get to have relationships with really cool guys that have welcomed our family to their land, and our dog, and super nice, super friendly, and they kind of have similar values. But I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it would be awesome to own a piece of land one day. We gotta work to get there. Well,
and realistically, when you start looking at some of the really well-known winemakers that are doing vineyard dozen and stuff, they don't own the vineyards, and they source the best fruit that they can source, and they make wines of character from all over the place, because you certainly can't own all the land, right? So I think what you guys are doing is really in that model of that unique winemaker, where they're finding the fruit that they like, they're finding the land that they like, and they're buying that fruit and making wine because it can give you a little more breadth in the selections.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hate to bash, I'm not going to bash owning a single site, because that'd be like my dream, but like, I guess you are kind of limited when you have one site. Mm-hmm. You got to make that wine has to be shining every single year. I mean, it's a lot of pressure, to be honest. But so yeah, we do have a little more flexibility with all the different sites we work with.
I personally, and I'll never make wine like that, but if I were going to do it, I think that's what I want to do, because then you can like find the stuff in all the different, all the different places that you just love wine from. And as wine drinkers, we love wine from every place. Why would you only want to make wine from the land you own in the one location you own land?
Is that how you make money?
I suppose. Lorene says because that's how you make money. Well, I don't know. In Napa, if they want to buy land, yeah, so I see Hilary back there. So what's vineyard land going for in Napa these days? How much an acre?
I mean, you could find $1 million an acre for a really good site. I mean, that's not even an exaggeration. You go to East Oakville, you're going to spend some money there.
Yeah, so we're talking hundreds of $1,000s an acre just to buy the land, and then and tens of thousands of an acre to maintain it. I mean, yeah. So
that's buying virgin land, like unplanted land. If you're buying an existing vineyard has already a reputation, you're paying way more. It's crazy. But yeah, there's fruit that sells for $25,000-$30,000 a ton in Oakville. So it's a different game.
So Diane's asking, when you don't own the vineyard, do you have any say on how the fruit is cultivated?
Yeah, you do definitely, but especially if you buy a lot of fruit from the vineyard. To be completely honest, though, I keep my there's a wall. I work in the cellar. I try to learn as much as possible in the cellar, and then when I'm with the grower, they're the expert. I don't want to tell them what to do because I don't have a degree in it. I didn't grow up doing it. They did. I have suggestions, but usually if I introduce myself to the site, I already know the site is pretty good and has a good reputation. So I'm not one to tell the grower what to do, to be honest. I respect their profession. I receive the fruit, and then that's where I take over. But and we're very lucky with our current growers. They are awesome. So they teach me. I walk, I ask questions, they answer. But yeah, no, there are people that source fruit, and there's nothing wrong with it. They want their blocks farmed a certain way. They can do, you can leaf more, you could drop more fruit. There's all sorts of things you can do to customize it. But yeah.
Yeah. So to maybe just add a little bit more to that discussion, the way that I always explain it is wine making from a vineyard site to the end result is like a Mr. Potato Head, where you have to choose where you plant the grapes. So you're like, and then the vines you're going to use, and the rootstock, and the vines, and the trellising, and whether you water, you don't water, all those things. It's like choosing the feet and the hands and the nose and the hat and the glasses and all these things. And everybody from the same vineyard could come out with a different looking Mr. Potato Head because of other decisions they make. Yeah. And you guys, being very small, you're relying on the experience of these guys who have been growing grapes. I mean, these farmers. I mean, in Wisconsin, we know farming, right? We know farmers, and they're grape farmers, and they've been growing grapes for years and years and years, and they know the vineyard site, and they know what works good to produce good grapes. But you guys can come in and probably, like you said, learn from them, and then also tell them, look, I'm looking for this characteristic. Can you help me achieve that in your farming practices? But ultimately, a harvest decision is probably most up to you, but you're not making that in a vacuum. You're taking advice from other winemakers, from the vineyard owners, the farmers, and your experience. I mean,
absolutely.
Like Lorene just said, the weatherman, you're looking at forecast, because if all of a sudden it's going to rain and you're so close, you're not going to let the grapes plump up, right? So yeah, for everybody listening out there, this is if you read anything about the history of Napa Valley and the history of winemaking, it is hardworking people, farmers and entrepreneurs, and people who rely on each other and learn and talk. And so Jason's not just making these decisions. He's probably meeting for coffee with the other winemakers, the other winery owners, and they're talking about what's going on here and there in this vineyard and that vineyard, and what pests you're seeing, what trends I mean, all these things. It's a community. And so, yeah, you do have input, but you're going to make that in conjunction with everything else that's going on.
We are so lucky. It's a pretty cool industry. It's a very small valley too. It's a very small industry. I'd say valley, but like Northern California, I mean, winemakers get together all the time, whether it's in tasting groups or whether your kids go to the same school or everybody is kind of willing to help in this industry, and we're still learning every year, whether it's on the business side, the admin side, the accounting side, on Hill's part, seller side. I'm constantly picking my friends' brains. So I'm not afraid to admit that. That's part of the fun of this business is tasting your buddies' wines and picking their brains, seeing what they do, touring their vineyards, seeing how they farm, and no one's an expert. You're constantly learning. So,
well, and it feels like the longer you're in a vineyard and the grower really respects you and trusts you, they do reach out more and say, "Do you want to see anything different? Did you like how last year's vintage turned out?"
Yeah,
and
that's actually
right. I think so.
It's a conversation, which is kind of cool. We've gotten to a point with some of our growers where they reach out and they kind of, "Hey, how's everything going?" Like, and it's just I don't know. I like we're starting to see the fruit of our relationships with our growers kind of develop into really positive relationships over the past kind of 5 years. So,
what was your first vintage putting in bottle for commercial?
2014.
2014.
Yeah, that was. I had no idea what I made 300 cases of wine, and I've sold it all in like San Francisco out of my truck, which is like a cheesy kind of like everybody says that, but that's what I had, like 3 restaurants that bought that all. I got lucky. And then I told you I met my buddy Nick. I think he's on here, and Nick just helped me. Our kids went to the same school and helped me kind of like figure things out. I had drinks with these guys, Nick and Tony, and I'll be thinking about those days forever. They got me into this business.
And that story mimics, if you read, and you obviously you live there. You didn't grow up there. You grew up in like New York or something, or out east.
All over the East Coast, Midwest. I went to high school in Illinois. Sorry, not Wisconsin, but Illinois. I'm a New York Giants fan.
Yeah. To admit that to this audience, I'm not sure. But you read about the history of Napa Valley, and that is, I mean, Robert Mondavi and all of the iconic winemakers. They're just dudes that wanted to make wine, and they just hung out and drank and tasted, and their kids grew up together. And yeah, it's cool. I mean, yeah. What?
Yeah.
Yeah, like Lorraine just said, family. So.
Oh yeah.
So do you guys have a tasting room somewhere?
We do tastings at Gamble, where we lease space in Oakville.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you guys back open yet for your tasting room or not yet?
We're waiting. Not yet. It's not. They opened up restaurants, but they did not open up these tasting rooms yet.
So do you guys want to get on a plane and come to Wisconsin?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can drive. That's fine. Bring the kids.
Yes.
Where should I go?
Yeah. So when you guys are open and people want to connect with you and come out and taste your wines and visit, how do they find you and where should they get directions?
Well, you want to?
They can email us, either Jason or Hilary at Driscoll Wine Co., and then we set it all up ourselves. We do our own schedule with Gamble to check and make sure we're not, overlapping one of their tastings, but it's all really customizable.
Yeah, great. And Driscoll Wine Company, just Google Driscoll Wine Company or Google Tilth, and you'll find the wines. I think the website's probably in the back of the bottles.
Yeah, DriscollWineCo.com.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I've been working on with Jason and Hilary and with some folks that are on the feed right now with Nick and with Nate. They're from the distributor that carry the wines in Wisconsin. As soon as I can get it done, Jason and Hilary are going to be in the shop, and then we're going to do a tasting sometime, probably in the fall. We're going to coordinate with a trip. If we have Kohler Food and Wine, they're going to come in and do a tasting, right, guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll go this fall for sure.
I know, I would love to.
Yeah,
The state is open.
Yeah. And Wisconsin's already open, so we could do a tasting next weekend.
Even go there.
Oh, Lorene's telling me to stop that conversation. But Hilary said they drive. Hillary's.
Oh, the fall in Wisconsin, that's one of my favorite places
Oh, it's
to be.
gorgeous.
I when I say I look forward to Kohler every year, I mean that wholeheartedly. I love coming out
We've
there.
had a blast there.
Yeah.
Starting in Milwaukee, and then now we got to kind of see other spots of Wisconsin, but that's a great state.
Yeah. Yeah, if you guys want to see north central Wisconsin, you make the trip up here. We'll put you up in our house or wherever, and we'll drink wine and we'll do a great tasting at the shop. So
fun.
Looking forward. We're gonna make that happen for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've already usurped about an hour of your guys' time. I really appreciate it. We love the wines, as you guys know, and I'm glad that you were able to join us tonight, and I'm sure that everybody that's on here really appreciated it. Thanks for representing, and I'll be talking to Nick and Nate and letting those guys know what else we need from you. I don't know if there's any other last minute questions or commentary here. Let's see what's I don't see anything. Lorene,
Sarah wanted to know what does Jason recommend drinking or eating with his wine?
Oh, Jason, we have a food recommendation. What do you suggest with food pairings with any of the things we tasted tonight?
Cereal, breakfast, lunch, dinner. No, with the Zin, it's a lighter bodied Zin, but still, I think it still goes kind of that classic meat kind of protein way. You can also have it with like a risotto, to be honest. It has a little bit of acid, but yeah, we drink it with. I'm working on barbecue right now, so I'm training myself to try to do smoked meats. But with the Pinot, we're big salmon fans lately. I think our Pinot can go well. It's a lighter style, so I think it goes well with a kind of salmon, grilled salmon. And then SB, it's fresh. You can drink it on its own. Drink it with seafood, something light. Drink it with salad. Oh, salad's actually really kind of hard to pair with, but yeah, stick with the lights. It's pretty. Chicken. Yeah, it's acid rich. It can cut through some of the fat in a dish, but yeah, the basics.
I actually think your Pinot is big enough that I would almost do it with some of the traditional Zin stuff, like barbecue, ribs, something off the grill. Pizza, for sure, pizza.
Yes.
We've been doing a lot of pizza lately.
Yeah.
The local pizza shop is giving dough, and they're doing kits for us because they were closed. So we've been rolling out dough and making our own pizzas. It's been so much fun. We're drinking a lot of Pinot actually with that.
Yeah, and we at the shops, as some of our folks here know, we do take and bake pizzas, and so we offer 5 different sort of like really unique, cool take and bake pizzas. Which everybody on the feed stick around because I'm going to talk about it. This would be a great pizza wine with some of our pizzas too.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know you did pizza. That's so awesome.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, Jason, Hilary, thank you very, very much for hanging out and tasting with us.
Thanks for having us.
So much.
Yeah. Really appreciate it.
Cheers. Everybody else here really, really appreciates it. And I hope that we see you in Kohler. And if we see you in Kohler, that means we will see you in Wausau, right?
Heck yeah. You better believe
it. All right. Thanks.
All right, take care.
You guys have a great night.
You too.
Cheers.
All right. So thank you very much for hanging out and tasting with us. They are really super down-to-earth folks. Love their wines. We carry a bunch of their different Zins. We've carried their Val d'Aiguille. I can get some of the Hebrew Pinots. If you guys want them, I'll bring them in. We've got some people in the feed here that are really involved with them. Just really, really nice tasting across the board. As you can see, I'm getting like empty. So I have to cut this short and go and pour myself another glass. But in the meantime, I want to reiterate just a couple really quick things. Our wine sale starts this week. Wednesday from 2 to 7 is our Kicker Club members. Kicker Club at either Weston or Wausau. Come into the Wausau store where the Wausau is where the wine sale is. Wednesdays for Kicker Club only. Thursday all day is our wine club members. Whether you're at Weston or Wausau, you come in, wine club only on Thursday at Wausau for the wine sale. And then Friday and Saturday open to everybody for the wine sale. Buy 3 bottles, get 3 free.
Next tasting.
Lorene's yelling at me. Next tastings. So on June 22nd, Monday, June 22nd,
I'll join.
Lorene's going to join. So for no other reason than the fact that Lorene will be here, and she's better to look at than I am. We're going to be doing a pizza pairing. So we encourage you. We're going to pick out the wines. We're going to pick out 3 wines, and they're going to pair with pizza. Some well, some not so well, and some like not at all, or maybe not at all, pretty well, and really well. We encourage you to buy the wines from us and buy the pizza from us. But of course, we also know there's other places that sell pizza. So if you want to buy pizza someplace else, we understand that. But otherwise, buy our Take It Bakes. And we're going to pick out 3 wines, and we'll be putting that out onto the Facebook page and probably an email pretty soon as far as what the 3 wines are. And as usual, you'll come in, you buy the 3 wines, it's a tasting set. And then we'll do Monday night on June 22nd. We're going to be making pizza and drinking wine, which is perfect in my world, really. The next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be sort of promoting and sort of partnering with Orin Swift Wines. So on June 18th, which is before the 22nd pizza tasting, on June 18th, Orin Swift is doing a tasting, a virtual tasting of 3 wines that you'll be able to buy at the shop, and then join winemaker Dave Finney, who's pretty iconic. I mean, he developed the Prisoner wines. He does a whole bunch of different wines, but he's got 3 wines we're going to be tasting. It's going to be the Mannequin Chardonnay, Palermo, and 7 Years in the Desert. Or is it 8 Years in the Desert? I think it's 8 Years in the Desert. Anyway, those 3 wines that he's going to be tasting, he will be leading the tasting through, I think it's WebEx. We'll put all the details in a post. Watch for that. And then lastly, if you liked the last tasting we did with Corey from Dustin Valley, and you like tonight's tasting with Jason and Hilary, you're going to love our upcoming tastings. We already have on board Clay Moritzen from Moritzen family or Moritzen Winery in Sonoma. Clay and Carrie Moritzen, we've been sort of wine world friends with them for a long time. They do a great job. We're going to be doing a Moritzen tasting. And then I have on the hook, and there's no commitments yet, so like don't hold me to it, but I have on the hook possibly Dan Dutton of Dutton Vineyards. Dan Dutton is an icon in wine world. Dutton Goldfield, he's half of that equation. Dutton Ranch is his now. That's his single label. Fabulous, amazing wines. And then we might have either Michael or Rob Mondavi that will join us for a tasting. So hopefully we're going to get those lined up. Watch our feed, pay attention, ask in the shops. We really, really appreciate all of your support through this weirdness. My goal is, even though we're open now, you can come in, you can dine in, you can get your coffee, you can drink coffee in, you can have lunch inside, you can have lunch on our patios, all those things you can do at both of our locations. But this right here, we're going to continue to do this. So our virtual tastings, it might just be me and Lorene, which if you like drinking with us, perfect. Otherwise, we're going to continue to hopefully do some winemaker events and watch for details. Again, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Watch for all the details. If you're looking for something, reach out. Otherwise, cheers. Be well and absolutely drink well. Thank you very much. Have a great night. Have a great week.